Brian, welcome to Roundtable number 21. Dion Patters,
Yeah.
21.
Glad to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, I'm excited for this one. We're talking about AI and rental software. It's a hot topic. I gave a presentation in West Texas even 2 weeks ago around the future of rental software, and 99% of the questions are around artificial intelligence. Even this registration for this episode has had a ton of traffic. So I know it's on people's minds. There's a lot of questions, a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear. Hopefully you'll talk us off the edge or why AI is a good thing. But excited to jump in here. There's a lot to talk about.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's like probably with any new kind of frontier, there's always like folks that are really excited about the possibilities. And then there's a lot of anxiety because we've seen, historically where technology can go the wrong direction. So excited to jump in.
Sure. So just for everyone, Brian and I were connected from a mutual friend. We become friends and actually work together. There's some AI features in Quipli we've recently launched using Scout. We'll talk about that. But Brian, maybe just start things off. Talk to us about your background. You're obviously the CEO of Scout. Tell us what that is and tell us how you really got into artificial intelligence, I think almost about 10 years ago.
Yeah. It's been awesome kind of working with you, just to put a note on that. So going back almost 10 years, I was really always just fascinated with bots and AI. I think it's like one of these major pieces of technology that democratizes access to, incredible like kind of, functionality, but also for folks that maybe don't have a traditional background, you have this like superpower at your fingertips with AI. So going back almost 10 years, I was working on building these bots, and my co-founder, he had a strong background working with cities and local governments. And so we kind of joined forces to build something called CityBot, which is like Siri for your city. And if you ever like got tired of hitting the same pothole, or you see a stoplight's out, anything like that, it's really hard to, communicate with the city other than filling out some form or sending some email. So CityBot makes it where you can just text a phone number, tell the city about the issue you're having, or maybe even just ask a question, and they'll let you know when that issue is resolved. Then I went on to do a little bit of work in genomics and medication risk analysis. So that was more traditional ML work, where CityBot was what they call NLP, essentially the ability for computers to understand language. And then I spent some time at a startup studio where we used ML for all kinds of things, a lot of marketing stuff. So product recommendations, content generation. And then for the last almost year now, I've been building Scout, and kind of that background, what it just showed us or showed me and my co-founders is it's really hard to get ML into production. So there's like kind of the data integrity, training models, deployment, monitoring, there's all this stuff. And so with Scout, what we're doing is just trying to shrink what normally takes weeks or months and turning that into days. So that's Scout, and that's a little bit on me.
Yeah. So you mentioned ML, which machine learning. Tell us about what is AI? How do we get here? Because a lot of people are sort of catching up in the last year or two of, wow, this brand new technology is come on so quickly. Reality, like I was reading, I think the first use of the word artificial intelligence was 1956, right? So it actually has been in progress for a long time. I think it reminds me of my dad's quote of, takes 10 years of all-nighters to be an overnight success. And like in some sense, AI has become an overnight success, but it's actually been decades in the making. Like talk to us about like the history of AI. How did we get here, where this is a whole episode around AI and it's like the hot topic that almost everyone's talking about.
Sure. Yeah. What you're kind of experiencing is these exponential growth curves, where as humans, we don't really have much in our lives where everything kind of is moving at a linear pace. And so when something happens with an exponential growth curve, I think it's just hard for us to like see like, wow, this is moving way, way faster, and it's hard to even really forecast. To your point, like going back, several decades, the real kind of unlock here is getting a lot of content and a lot of like human knowledge into a digital format, and using that as kind of the foundation for a lot of these ML models, these AI models to function. You'll hear me kind of like repeat this sermon a few times, but if that content, if that data is not in a format that the AI can use, the AI is bad. So what we've seen in, previous years where the AI is not very capable, it's more a reflection of the quality of the data than necessarily the AI itself, though there have been advances on both fronts. So we have this kind of, multi-decade process of getting content into digital form. Then we have the internet, which makes it accessible to everybody. So not just these siloed, digital, big enterprise got a bunch of documents or what have you. Then you have the kind of rapid adoption or ramp up of traditional ML. So one thing to note here is folks will use, and I as well, use the term AI more generally in the way that somebody might use the word technology, but they could be referring to a MacBook or an iPhone or the internet. It's a lot of things. So AI umbrellas, in my opinion, two large cohorts. ML, which is what has always or been around for a really long time. ML is simply just forecasting or trying to predict the value of some column in a spreadsheet, for example. Got a big spreadsheet, got a bunch of rows of data. You get to the 10,000th row and you got a cell that's empty. ML can look at the previous rows and have a good guess on what the value should be there. So that shows up in your daily lives already with, the YouTube algorithm or social media. You go on Amazon, why they seem to always show the thing that you want to buy. That's traditional ML at work. That's product recommendations. When this new thing that everybody's kind of really excited about the potential, this is what they call an LLM, which stands for a large language model. And what it's doing at a very simple level, some people call it a bit of a parlor trick, but it is truly incredible, is it's simply predicting the next word in a sentence. And what's happened is, going back to the history, is all this human knowledge information was digitized, then it was put on the internet, and then teams, large, AI teams, have trained these LLMs. And they've gathered all this information from the internet, Wikipedia and YouTube and all these places. And they've trained these large language models, which have billions of parameters, to essentially understand language. That's what they're kind of meant to do. And what that allows us to do is give it a paragraph or series of paragraphs or a bit of information, ask it for a response with a set of instructions, and it can give us, it can write out, an essay, or, help do your homework, or do product descriptions, or really all this stuff that traditionally has been outside the realm of AI. So just to kind of recap, traditional ML, long kind of tail there of improvements. And then these LLMs, which was, something unlocked by a specific scientific paper called Attention is All You Need, which was originally produced by Google, but OpenAI found that paper. Well, everybody found that paper, but OpenAI is the one that kind of ran with it in the beginning. So that's where we're at now.
We talk about AI, there's really the two parts, the machine learning, which has been here for a long time. When you open up Spotify, and it's like, wow, how'd you know I like these types of songs, right? That's sort of been here for years and decades. That's cool. But what's really startling people is the large language models, the LLMs. And Google sort of came out with that paper, OpenAI capitalized on it. When did all of this happen? When did the large language models really when did people start thinking about it? When did that paper come out? And how do we get from that point to where we are in 2024?
Yeah, don't quote me on this, but I want to say it's 2018 or 2019 when that paper is published. So we're talking about the span of, half a decade or so. And really the thing that folks are trying to unlock in that process is how much information can we bake into the model? Like early models, a few 100 million parameters. Now we're talking 70, hundreds of billions of parameters, trillions of parameters. So we're talking a rather short period of time, on this arc of history. Yeah.
So when people talk about AI, the future of AI, we're really talking about that second piece, the LLMs, the language models, right? That's sort of what we're really talking about. And that is very soon. And that paper came out 5-6 years ago. I mean, if anyone's used ChatGPT 4 or any of these other tools that, we've worked on together, this isn't 100 years in the making in a sense, like the technology and the foundation is, but this is a huge step forward that's rapidly accelerating, it seems like.
You got it. Exactly. And there's a few kind of underlying pieces that are happening. You've probably seen NVIDIA always reference on the news of like stock going crazy. These new kind of, everybody's familiar with CPUs that power your computer, but these GPUs are this kind of new type of processing unit that can crunch data really fast. Originally meant for graphics processing. That's where the G in GPU comes from. But as this technology comes on board, we need to process more data. So hardware is ramping up. And really the major blocker for us, like if we look deeper into the future, is the cost of electricity. So what we've done is with these LLMs, we've coupled intelligence to electricity, so processing power. So as the cost of electricity continues to descend, so will the availability of quote unquote intelligence, and it'll just be it'll be abundant.
So this is happening fast. How quickly are things moving in the next 5 years, 10 years? Is it a linear thing, or are things going to accelerate? Like how, there's a lot of trends, crypto and NFTs and all these things. Half of them don't work, but this one seems to have some staying power and could be truly transformational to every industry in a 10-year period. Like, what's your view? How quickly are things changing? And where can this technology get to in the next 5 and 10 years?
Yeah, the crypto kind of thing kind of took the same arc as like early internet. There's a boom, there's a bunch of speculation, kind of leaves a bad taste in folks' mouth. But same with the internet, post.com bubble, give it a few years and it'll come back. This doesn't have that same market manipulation rash as these previous endeavors had. If we look at the rate of improvement, a simple way that I think about it is right now, the current models, they are on parallel with, a graduate student, somebody who's quite well educated, understands English and linguistics at a very deep level. That's today. So pass the bar, get an MBA, the LLMs of today can pull that off. So a smart individual. If we look out a few years, probably not even 5, there will likely be AIs that can pass essentially any test that we have to pass for licensure or what have you as humans. So really anything that a human can do, there will be models that are quite capable or can do it at an equivalent rate. If you look out 10 years, there will be models, and this is going to sound the scary part, but there will be models smarter than all humans combined that have ever lived.
Yeah.
And that's where the fear kind of comes in of like, what does that mean? But just kind of speaking to this exponential growth, we're within a decade of something, akin to a super intelligence.
That's right. I went to an AI conference 2 months ago, and I used ChatGPT 3.5. I used to. Now I pay for the $20 a month to use ChatGPT 4. And the analogy that one of the speakers said was, ChatGPT 3.5 is like a 4-year-old, and I have a 3-year-old, so I sort of get that. A lot of gibberish, sometimes it's helpful, right?
Yep.
And then a year later, ChatGPT 4 came out, and they said it's like a college graduate, right? And I use that every single day for something, and it's not always right. I think I'm probably, running this company, probably better at solving problems than a 22-year-old. So it's a helpful tool, but it's not fully there yet. But like, what he said the next step is in the next couple of years, it's going to be smarter than any individual human. And then a couple of years after that, it's smarter than every human combined who's ever lived. And that is like, that's not 100 years away. We're talking within 5 years of that potentially happening.
Certainly.
So that's pretty scary. Like, what's the ethics part of this? How do we not like all get out of a job here and this thing becomes sentient and takes over the world and Skynet? Like, how do we know that's not going to happen? Because there's some serious people who are very worried about that.
Yeah, it will be a tool. There are areas here where it can go awry, but unlike, I think a good proxy might be social media. In the beginning, everybody's excited. We can connect with, friends that we haven't seen in a decade or folks that we've never met on the other side of the world. Really kind of a revolutionary technology. Then we learn that, the economics of that business model are based on your attention. Mm-hmm. And over, a few years, we're like, turned from users to we became the product that was being sold. And so this is something that we just kind of learned on the fly. Mm-hmm. Of like this thing that we thought was a diamond, it can cut you. And we learned that, I think, the hard way. The great thing about these AIs and the super intelligence is that we're going into this with that memory, cognizant of all of the ways, now maybe not all the ways, but many of the ways that this can go awry. And it'll look a lot like, the things that we know that can happen that are bad are AI essentially tricking people, the fake news, in the future, this whole podcast can be done by an AI and it'll be indistinguishable from what we're doing right now. So there's a certain authenticity that needs to happen. But the point I'm making is the people working in the space are highly cognizant of what can go awry here and actively working. It's one of the few industries that's actively working with, the government on how can we build regulation to protect ourselves from ourselves. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of a nuance that I think is worth appreciating, is that the ways that this can go bad are top of mind just based on, previous technologies.
Yeah. I mean, I think about the early days of social media and people were meeting their spouse and they're getting married and having amazing families. And it was like, well, how great is social media? And then it's just turned and it's like all these depression statistics and all these greed gets in. And, obviously now TikTok is potentially getting banned. There's a lot of dark side and they're still good, but there's a lot more bad. There's a lot more bad than we thought. And it sounds like that experience, people are very aware of where we're going. And to me, it seems like the cat's out of the bag. Like there's no stopping this train, unless somehow the government can ban AI, which doesn't seem likely to happen, even if they wanted to. Seems like this is going. And I think now the conversations move toward how do we make it work and limit the downsides. And there still will be downsides. I know it can make videos and you can imagine it's making a video of the president saying something and it seems 100% real. And you could sort of, there's a lot of negatives here, right?
Yep.
It sounds like though, there's experiences from the past technology adoptions that people are taking this more seriously to start to prevent some of those downsides, because it does seem this technology is going to be hundreds or thousands of times more powerful than even social media, which has been disruptive in our world, right? This is like a whole different thing and beast that we're dealing with.
Exactly. If you look at the plus side, it's like, how much smarter are you? You're kind of, that's one kind of nuance here to fully appreciate it's hard to appreciate is you're already using AI all day, every day. You just don't know it. It's not presented to you in that way. And so in terms of cat out of the bag, we're quite deep into this rabbit hole already. But on the downsides, so even though everybody's cognizant of where this can go wrong, it still doesn't mean that we've thought of all the scenarios and all the possibilities. And there still will be there will be scenarios that are not good. So there's kind of immediate stuff like trying to eliminate hallucinations. If you've ever talked to ChatGPT and you say, hey, what's a good stock to buy today, for example, and it'll name something because it's just trying to predict the next word. It's not really worried about truthfulness as much as to answer your question as best as it can. So that would be a hallucination, and those come in many forms. When you use AI though, and you'll see a bunch of tooling coming around this to try to eliminate and reduce hallucinations. And that comes in with giving the AI access to current data. Mm-hmm. So the hallucinations come from the fact that these models are trained on information from 2022 or 2023. So who won the Super Bowl is going to give you an answer, but it's not going to be right. So giving the AIs access to current information. And then the last piece here, or there's several pieces, but one other big piece is what you'll hear a lot is folks use the term prompt. the AI prompt. And what that is simply a set of instructions telling the AI only talk about these things and only talk about them in this way. And so the point just being is with some of these additional pieces, these AIs will go beyond just answering the question, regardless if it's true, to answering it based on real world information.
And I think on the hallucination side, like we do team trivia every Friday, and like it'll do things like it'll be like, who was the first president of the United States? And one of the answers is George Washington. The next question will be like, the first president of the United States, George Washington. I was like, well, you sort of gave the answer away, ChatGPT. You're really smart sometimes. Sometimes you do stupid things. If you've used it enough, you start to see some of the edge cases, and that makes me go like, well, I don't actually know if this thing's going to take over the world. Again, it's going to keep getting smarter, but it's a tool, and I don't know if it's the end all be all, but it's an important tool. So obviously this is a rental podcast. We've talked about AI a lot. I want to get into how this is applicable to rental companies. So if you're a 1, 2, 5, 10 location equipment rental company, and you're just learning about AI today and knowing the difference between machine learning and the large language models, how do I even start thinking about this? I've never used ChatGPT. I've never even used AI. How do I start moving in this direction to start getting more comfortable with this if we do start to believe that this is the future?
Sure. Yeah. One kind of simple rule of thumb that I like to use when just thinking of it as like an automation tool. So if there's stuff that's quite laborious or annoying, or you got to like crunch a bunch of data in your head, these are always good candidates for AI. That shows up in a few places: business intelligence, content marketing. So myself, like I always write the content last because it's like the least favorite thing, in my on my calendar to do. And if you're real busy and you're doing operations and you're working with customers and you got a ton of employees and you got so much to do in a day, like writing a email newsletter is really the last thing you're going to get to. And with this technology, ChatGPT or the other AI tools, they will at least give you a good draft to start with. You'll always, probably forever, ever, amen, want to keep a human in the loop. You'll hear that term a lot, human in the loop. Essentially an editor to review, so it catches, the examples like Kyle mentioned, where it kind of gives the answer away or, does something quite silly. The other one that is very common is customer support. And this is traditionally a cost center for most businesses. But this magical thing happens with this AI where you can turn customer support from a cost center to a profit center. And what that looks like is, and we do this with a lot of great companies, you might have a customer success or customer support person already on the team. And what this AI allows them to do is just give much more higher quality support to a much larger number of customers, if that's one of your limiting factors. And the way it works is, if you have your data structured and well documented, your data, your knowledge base, information about your equipment, information about your rental policies, return policies, all these things, you can have the AI look at that information and answer the customer's question. And this is really, been done, you've seen probably bots and NLP and some of the stuff I worked on in the past. This is like totally different world. You could think of like the stuff that we were doing, 5-10 years ago as a bicycle, and this is a Ferrari. The answer quality is high. It's able to do the knowledge retrieval accordingly. And at a minimum, if you can load all this data and give it to the AI, your customer success person can at least get their answers drafted. And it just saves them tons and tons and tons of time, because you find that they answer the same questions over and over. The profit center piece, so that's just kind of reducing the cost of customer success and allowing you to support more customers. The profit center piece comes in where what you'll find is customers start asking questions that the AI cannot find answers to. And it's those gaps, those nuggets, that's where the profit lives. So you have all this rental policy, return policy, all these scenarios documented. And then somebody says, hey, I got a lift that I need to return, but XYZ happened, all these parameters. AI goes and looks at your knowledge base and it can't find the answer. you want to get that answer documented by a human. And now the next time that comes around, that answer, that question gets answered. But furthermore, you can use these insights from your customers. You can see these clusters of the types of questions they ask. And then that turns into blog posts and content marketing. And, everybody's asking for a particular type of lift that we don't have. I want to surface that. I want the AI to tell me about that so we can put that in our inventory. And now what has been for decades to the place where you're like, a lot of pain, a lot of cost, now becomes this insight tool to tell you how to drive your business.
Interesting. So just kind of going backwards, we're talking sort of crawl, walk, run, right? So the first step here, especially if you're a rental company, right? The boring, tedious work, and you don't necessarily need that integrated into your rental software. You don't even really need anything besides ChatGPT, right? And that could be, I pay $20 a month for ChatGPT for it. It's definitely worth it. So I would recommend just doing that. And you can do content creation, newsletter, basic data analysis. It's your 22-year-old intern who you pay $20 a month, not $20 an hour, right? And I think that's probably the first way to get started here. And you mentioned the human in the loop. What we're talking about is dipping your toe in the water. And I've talked to Dan Crowley. He runs the Peer Executive Group. It's about several hundred rental companies, leading rental companies meet together. And AI is coming up in almost every conversation. And he said that he talked to dozens of rental companies, and what they're doing is using it for creating job descriptions, for content marketing, for reviewing, company values and mission and vision statements. And you don't need anything besides the $20 a month ChatGPT 4. And you can start just having that intern sort of work through a lot of documentation, emails, things like that. Sounds like that would be the first place to start for people to start getting comfortable with where the technology is, right? I think we're good on that. The second part you're talking about is how do we then start using AI to engage with customers, right? And I think the first place you've talked about is customer support. And, if anyone has used, if you've flown on Delta or anyone else, right, they'll ask you, what would you like to do? And they have 4 options, and you can sort of click the buttons, and it's sort of not really a conversation. You're just sort of working through a decision tree. That's where it used to be. And what we're talking about now, it's very human-like responses. And, going from the bicycle to the Ferrari, what you're talking about is the next step here after you sort of get past that boring, tedious work is, can you start using AI to start engaging directly with customers, particularly on support tickets? Sounds like that would be the next best place to start. Am I hearing you right?
I think so. I think that's a good spot. You get acquainted with the strengths and weaknesses of it with real time. You're using it almost like, content marketing. And then you see where it's very successful. And then you can build, a simple FAQ, load that into the AI and see how it does. And then, the real goal, I think, is, to automate as much as possible. And that customer support has always been a place that, there's no technology that has come along prior to this that seems to really, truly automate it.
Yeah. I mean, and just for full transparency for everybody, we've been working together since we launched our first AI feature at the ARA show in February, and it was a support bot. We decided, and if you send a support ticket to Quipli today, it's still a human responding. That's 100% how we do it today. But we have this Ask Quipli Mate AI feature in the top corner, and you can ask questions, and it reads our knowledge base and gives you real-time support tickets. Even in our best case scenario, right, we're going to respond within 5 minutes to your support ticket. But if you want a 5-second response, you can get that within the Quipli software. We worked with you guys on that. And I think that's sort of cool with the technology is that was 1 day of effort for our team, thanks to all the technology work that you guys have done. And we got that up and running. And in 2 months, we've had over 800 uses of it. And that is with a very basic version of this. So for us, as we start thinking about the future of AI and how does that integrate into rental software, we launched that in February. I had low expectations because I had no idea, right? And that's 800 plus support tickets we would have had to manually respond to. And, we also get feedback. So it'll ask you thumbs up, thumbs down, and from the customer. And if it's thumbs up, okay, good. And the machine learns on that, right? Thumbs down, we know where the gaps are. We also see some of the tickets that we don't have answers for. So what you're talking about is you can start to document where the gaps are, fill out the knowledge base. So, for us, we've gone this path, right? We've done the boring, tedious work. I've been using ChatGPT for just basic copy stuff, right? The next level is how do we build a lightweight support bot, essentially, and we've seen a lot of success with that. What's the next level? Okay, we've done that. Like, where does this go next? The third bucket is more the advanced AI use cases. What are some of the next things that a rental company could be thinking about?
Yeah. So what you're faced with once you kind of get through one just note to kind of touch on real quick that you reminded me of. We found it incredibly valuable, and I think we can all like agree to this, is it's important, in my opinion, when you have a customer or really anybody that is talking to an AI, it's worth being very transparent that this is an AI.
Mm-hmm.
It just removes so much friction where if it does something silly, folks are already kind of getting acquainted with the fact that it has gaps, and they're able to let those slide. If you try to go into it and essentially, dupe the customer into thinking they're talking to a human, this is a recipe for disaster, because it's going to, it's going to go south quickly. And if folks just fully appreciate, like if you can imagine using Google and you try to pretend that it was a real human and it gave you the wrong links, like you're gonna be like, this person should be fired today. Mm-hmm. But we all use Google knowing the fact that it's a piece of technology, it's a tool like every other tool, and we give it some grace when it doesn't perform how we want it to. Just wanted to note that.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I think if you have that expectation, what you're really using it for is speed, because like you can get an answer in seconds. And if it's the wrong answer, okay, let me actually send my real support to get into a human, or click, call me, etc. But sometimes you just need like be pointed in the right direction, and it's actually like, I don't need a back and forth with the support agent. Hey, how are you? Great. Just tell me where the button is, right? And it won't be as accurate as a human, at least not today, but what it does give you is incredible speed, where like you can get answers in seconds, where that used to take, in a best case scenario, minutes, yep. Right? I think that's what you're paying for. That's what you get, right? And I think if you sort of frame it as, in our software, it says AI. It's very clear it's AI. The expectation is lower, but you get the speed. I think that's the right framing, right? You don't want to mislead anyone. You sort of not set yourself up for success.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody's doing it in a malicious way. They're wanting to be like, oh man, this is like this brand new technology. I think they might be over leveraging what it's capable of right now. So it's just worth being kind of cognizant of that. And honestly, being like super transparent, saying it's AI, what we see across the board is engagement goes up, because even though you got a phone number, you got an email, everybody's been on the support line with, from your cell phone company to the airline, you do it because you got to do it. But if you gave me the opportunity to just like text in a box and get an answer, I'm going to pick that. I will eventually go to the phone call if I have to, but I'm going to do the, path of least resistance first. So,
well, yeah, even on that point, when, we started Quipli 4 years ago, was really around the thesis of online renting and e-commerce, which is, depending on who you talk to, 20 to 30% of all orders right now, because there are people who don't want to talk to people, especially millennials and Gen Z. They're like, you know what? I just want to just get the answer and not have to, even if it's not a phone call, I don't want to have to text or talk to someone. And I think part of why people are gravitating towards the AI, it's like your grammar can be sloppy. You can just sort of type in whatever you want. You're not, you don't have to put on a face as much. And we have very polite customers who say, "Good morning, how are you?" And like I read the answers to the AI, and people are just typing 2-word sentences, right? That like you probably wouldn't send to a human. I think there's the same people who want to rent online are probably the same people who want to use an AI bot because they don't really want to engage with the person. And that's not bad or good. That's just sort of how it is sometimes.
Well, you can imagine too, like somebody, maybe, if you work kind of in the industry, you're familiar with what all this equipment does and how to use it. But, somebody who is just doing a weekend project and they need to pump out their pool and they need a trash pump, let's say, they might not even know they need a trash pump. They just, and so if they just say, traditionally considered quote unquote dumb questions to, an AI, they're going to ask them because they know they're not going to be judged for asking kind of a silly question. So if we look into that third bucket, what you're really going to be presented with is a question of build versus buy. So what does build look like? A lot of technical stuff. Probably need at the moment, some engineering on your staff. You got to do I'll just throw out a few words that are just maybe things that you'd be cognizant of or need to take on with the build: vector stores, RAG, retrieval augmented generation, data pipelines. There's a ton of stuff in there that you're going to need to assemble and maintain to get AI into the world if you're going to build it. Most folks are going to opt for the buy option, where a lot of that technical infrastructure is abstracted away, and they have preset, templates or workflows where they can just essentially flip a switch and they'll work for them. The kind of going back to the very beginning of our conversation, the quality of the data is directly correlated to the quality of the answers of the AI. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of the great things about Quipli is you already have all your data there. You can just access an AI that has it already curated and assembled, all the relationships between inventory, policies, site. If it's all there, it's easy to switch on an AI. And I think that's the third bucket, where we truly start to see all these automations that we can't even really fathom now, that once we have the data organized in a way that the AI can use.
Yeah, and I think as we think about AI in equipment rental, it's not going to be like a skid steer that's like driving itself in like, hospital that's going to build itself. Like that's not soon, maybe one day, probably actually one day, not 5 years or 10 years. I think what will happen is the rental softwares will probably bring this in. But once you get past phase 1 and phase 2, where it's sort of the primitive versions of this, like I think it's the rental softwares that'll drive this into the industry because of what you just said, because you have access to the data, right? And the data that a rental software has is all of your customer information, all of your prices, your inventory levels, supply and demand. You can see obviously what you have on stock and sort of what's you can see missed rentals, you can see website traffic, their financial data. There's like an incredible amount of data, plus like the external data you could get from the market, from Google or somewhere else. So I think it'll be the rental software. That's what we've talked about. And just to catch everyone up, there's effectively like 3 features that we've launched since we've talked together, right? One was the support bot, which has gotten 800 plus uses. The second is, which came out last night, is when you're adding new products, you have to go write a description yourself, right, for your e-commerce site. Well, we've integrated now with you guys where ChatGPT essentially will write that description in a second. That's now out. They're coming out in 2 weeks. When you search for a specific product name, we can create aliases, right? Because a lot of products have multiple names, right? So when you're searching for certain things on the website or in the rental software, if you search for a skid steer, it may not hit a loader, things like that, right? So that's the third thing. Those are still like sort of basic features that are now going to be out, right? So where does this go next? What are some of the big blocks that a rental software, and I don't know, maybe our competitors are listening and get some ideas, but like where do the rental softwares go next? What are like the next stair step levels here that are more advanced to some of those version 1 features we've talked about?
Yeah, the all the conversations we've had is, the LLMs that we talked about at the beginning. These AIs that understand English, that can produce these text-based answers. They can also produce code as well, but just for context, they can generate content, write answers. The next thing getting unlocked is something known as a VLM, so vision language model. So giving these AIs vision is, imagine how much information you consume with vision versus hearing on a daily basis. The same will be true with these AIs. And so simple things like I get all these random PDFs, invoices from manufacturers. They're all different formats. We got to take that PDF, do OCR, essentially do some vision recognition on it, and extract all of these pieces of data that you need for your operations. That's like a big, easy one. Then you look at some of your daily workflows where you guys are like out in the field, you're like doing, work on a piece of equipment. Imagine a camera app where you can show, essentially like take a video of a piece of equipment or an image of a piece of equipment and extract a lot of data from it. Or that image, gets you access to the manual for that piece of equipment. And so essentially giving these AIs the ability to use vision in the way that we use vision. Like we look at a piece of equipment, we know what it is. Giving AIs that ability is a huge leap that we'll see coming next.
Yeah. So on the first one you mentioned, sort of like purchase orders in a sense, right? Because you're ordering equipment, you have to generate a purchase order, then you have to onboard that into your system. We actually got a question from Ahmed who said, I think relates to what I'm going next, is how can AI help list and update and automate my inventory for equipment easily on my website, right? So I think we've sort of talked about that, which came out last night. It's like when you're adding equipment, it'll write the description for you. That's a small way to start helping this. But I'm wondering, is there a way like you create a purchase order with a manufacturer, you upload that into your rental software, and it automatically does a bunch of work for you, where it can get potentially pictures from the manufacturer because we know the specific make, model, year. You can write the descriptions, potentially give you some basic pricing guidelines. I don't know, but there's a manual process for automatically, for updating your inventory. It takes 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes per item.
Yeah.
How can AI help that?
Yeah. So, so the vision piece I mentioned, but also there's this ability to chain these AIs together. So if you use, ChatGPT, it's like it's one chain, one link, you talking to the AI and the AI response. So with these chaining of these AIs, you can chain together multiple features. So in the example of you get a purchase order, you load that into, let's say, Quipli, and then Quipli just triggers 3 or 4 AIs to start doing some work for you. The first one is, got the make and model. I'm going to go to the manufacturer's website and I'm going to get the latest image. Easy peasy. Then I'm going to, write a description. And not only am I going to write a description, but I'm going to be cognizant as the AI of SEO and what keywords really work in my given market. And so it's not only just like a description that everybody gets, but it's a description specifically for my market.
Mm-hmm.
Then I'm going to grab the manual, maybe have some of that information like baked in. And then I might do a third AI chain together where I go and look at the market rates for this particular piece of equipment, and I'm going to price it accordingly. There might be some kind of tolerance. Maybe the AI presents you with, here's the bottom of the market, here's the top of the market. And then, this only gets really unlocked with something like Quipli, but that pricing can also be dynamic. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't need to get priced just when you load in the inventory. That AI can continue working. But just if we kind of keep it to add a piece of inventory, all those things that right now take, quite a while for somebody to do for the team, imagine all that happening in the matter of less than a minute.
Mm. And that's the feature came out last night. That's what we're moving towards, right? That first piece is the descriptions that are now being generated by AI, and you can review it, human in the loop, 100%, right? But that whole purchase order experience, are there other aspects of that? You can almost imagine like purchase order comes in, you drag and drop it into the box, and the whole thing just runs. You go, here you go, here's your recommended inventory, right? With pictures, descriptions, pricing. Would you like to review and approve it? And that, whatever 20-minute process is now 2 minutes, right? That is one, and the fact that we've already started on that, right? That is something that we'll continue to look at. The second thing you mentioned, though, is the dynamic pricing side, which a lot of the nationals have been doing, where effectively, we've talked about it on this podcast before, but it's not just raising prices, it's around increasing utilization, which ultimately increases revenue. And a lot of studies say you can increase revenue 5%, 10% if it's done well. That sometimes means lowering prices on a Tuesday in spring season, when you have aerators and most people are renting them on Saturdays. Well, maybe you should lower on a Tuesday because you're not, people are at work, et cetera. And by lowering that price, you'll get someone who's more price sensitive, more flexibility to rent that item. The initial way people have been thinking about dynamic pricing is a bunch of rules. You generate all these rules and you sort of have an answer, right? Do you think there's a possibility you can use artificial intelligence for that to start making pricing recommendations as well?
100%. So this is kind of a form of the product recommendation, the AI that we all use today. Like the same underlying mechanics that show the right Amazon product when you log into Amazon is what would kind of be driving the underlying piece here. So this is, again, chaining together multiple models. So not only LLM work, but also traditional ML work, because you're going to need to have the LLM, the AI, go out and fetch all the comps and have access to your current inventory and pricing. But then there's going to be traditional ML to make a prediction, just a tabular prediction. So multiple pieces.
So if we did dynamic pricing 5 years ago, it would have been ML only. What you're saying now is you would use ML plus LLM, and ultimately it would be more compelling and better experience overall.
Yeah, because with traditional ML, so if we just say like trying to get a grasp of the current pricing in the market, a given kind of locality. Traditional ML, you have to build a bunch of data pipelines that are rather brittle because you're looking for pricing that's maintained not by you, but a third party. And so if that third party changes anything on that, pricing page, that data pipeline that you're using to figure out how your price should change, it breaks. It doesn't work. So an LLM can look at a web page like a human does, see the pricing, see the different parameters that it needs, and then pass that back to the ML. So the LLM, the AI, becomes your data pipeline, much more robust than the days prior.
And what data points would you think the artificial intelligence would need to start using some of those pricing, to start making some pricing recommendations? In your mind, obviously this is sort of off the cuff here, but like what are some of the variables that an LLM would start to look at?
Yeah, I would approach pretty much all these problems in the same way that you would do it today. So if you loaded a piece of equipment, you're probably going to go look at a few competitor sites. You might look at your like industry organization site, see if they have any recommendations. Maybe call a friend or ask a friend if they have any insights. Think of the AI doing the same thing. So give the AI access to the model, the make, the manufacturer, and the area, the kind of zip codes that you want to reference, and then have it do a Google search to pull up pricing in that area. Then the next step is something called a SERP, but essentially go to those sites, get that content, pull it back, and then process it. Essentially say, what is the lowest price you found? What is the top price you found? And do that a few times where you get a kind of a cohort of data for times of day, different, types of equipment. And now you have like a good corpus of information that you can, do these recommendations.
So some Google searches, really just look at competitor sites. And there's also an element you'd be able to look at your own inventory levels, utilization, historical utilization, current prices, and really, where what inventory do you actually have and how's that performing? I can imagine a further step of this is starting to make recommendations of, hey, I think you have too many aerators. They're selling, and I don't think you have enough skid steers. Consider buying some of those. It could probably start helping with some of fleet purchasing decisions. Again, I think there's still the human in the loop to make the final call here, but I think just starting to surface and ping and flag different recommendations. It's not just the pricing side, but it's also what do you do with your inventory? Should you buy more? Should you sell more? It's really just a whole, evaluation of your fleet composition as well.
Yeah, the kind of product recommendation world, like we apply these like windage factors. So if you're like, a rifleman or something, you kind of know where the target is, but you apply this windage factor of, for the wind.
Yeah.
The wind in this scenario is your current inventory count. So if you got 6 skid steers and the AI returns and says market rate for Tuesday afternoon in your area is X, on average, you got 6, like keep it at the average. You start getting down to 2, you apply this windage factor and say, hey, let's bump it up like 10, 20%. And you can kind of play with that windage factor based on the amount of inventory you have left.
Interesting. So we sort of talked about those 3 buckets, right? Where are things almost yesterday? How could you get started, like already? What's coming right now? What's coming in the next year or so? Where it was like, put your crazy hat on. Where's this go in 5 years, particularly for like equipment rental and rental software companies? Like what's the really crazy stuff if this technology expands and grows like we think it could, where can this really go in 5 years, 10 years? What's some of the crazy stuff that this technology can do one day?
Yeah, there's worlds where, or maybe there's some future where you know exactly, you can predict with very high accuracy that John Doe is going to get a skid steer at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. That's kind of the immediate, like the insights that we're essentially going to be able to predict the future in a way that, kind of like predicting the weather, although that's not always great. Now we're all like, you talk to humans and talk to these AIs and it's all kind of mimicking, human behavior. But imagine giving the skid steer the ability to talk, like making these, skid steer. Yeah. Just giving it, intelligence. So you can essentially speak to your skid steer and say, how do I fuel this up? What maintenance was performed in the last 3 weeks, or 3 years or what have you, essentially giving these traditionally, dumb, items, the intelligence, giving the skid steer the ability to tell you, hey, there's a particular vibration that seems to be likely this issue. You need to, do some maintenance. And then real crazy is like you said, kind of mentioned earlier, like the skid steer is doing some of the work with no human in the loop. So
that's a little scary.
Yeah.
Getting involved with the physical world, but it sounds like if you have a bunch of data points, you've had telematics data, you had the data from the rental software, which is utilization, who's used it, et cetera. Some of what you mentioned, I think, was the vision language model. You can start taking videos and that start picking up on things. All of that data combined, you can have the skid steer start to have a voice of its own. In a sense, it sounds a little weird to say, but like, if like I mentioned earlier, ChatGPT 3.5 is a 4-year-old, maybe you can get the skid steer to be a 4-year-old in a sense where it can start to say, hey, like I'm about to break down, or don't put me out on a month rental because it's not going to last, or hey, I'm overutilized. Can you get me some help? It'll start flagging a lot of service and maintenance things, but also just starting to speak for itself in a sense, right? That's sort of what you're saying. With all these data points, you can almost create a voice for an inanimate object. Is that right?
Yep. Yeah. It kind of like ourselves right now. Like we know when we're hungry, we walk into the kitchen and we, or maybe we order on Uber Eats. That analogy might work better. Imagine the skid steer being cognizant of its maintenance history, issues it's had, usage, the way that it's been used. And it knows that there's a high likelihood that it's going to need a new belt or a new link or a new X, Y, and Z. And then telling the store owner, hey, based off of all these factors, it's likely that we're going to need to buy this new equipment. I've already kind of put it in your cart. I'm kind of fabricating stuff up now, but I've already put it into your cart. All you got to do is push this button and it'll get here, in 2 weeks. And I'm going to probably need it within 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's crazy. A little weird, but you can also imagine like the overlap of several like objects starting to have a voice of their own. Like you have, the rental software starts to have a voice of its own, the equipment, the builder who's saying, I'm going to build this house and here's the blueprint. It'll say, here's exactly what you need, which interacts with the rental software, which interacts with what's available. And you can sort of, all of that problem solving, which is a lot of humans involved, it can sort of almost run on its own in a sense. That's sort of the longer path here, right? And I think that's a little scarier, but like that's sort of where this could go.
Yeah, that's actually that's a pretty great idea, honestly. Like the idea that you could, load in some drafts or, load in, a job description. And the byproduct of that is, recommendations on, you got to go see the nail guy, you got to go to the equipment rental place, you got to do X, Y, and Z, and having all of that kind of pre-assembled just off some drafts. It's pretty smart.
I think from the rental software, I mean, everyone's short on labor is one fact. And number two, we also don't want to replace everyone's jobs either, right? I think AI will create new jobs for people. I think we should focus a lot on the new jobs that are being created, right? But there's an element of like, we should help with labor shortage. At the same time, we don't want to replace everyone's job. But I do think there's an element of like, does the rental software get, as you mentioned, smarter than every human that's ever lived? Do you have the world's best rental coordinator sort of help run your business, where it's like, hey, I think you need to sell this. I would not rent to that guy. He's a do not rent customer. That license is a fake license. Don't rent to that guy. I think we need to raise prices over here.
Yeah.
You need to order, these two pieces of equipment, drag and drop that, upload into the system. You almost have like the Michael Jordan of rental coordinators is the core of your rental software. That is like the longer view of where this could go. And it doesn't mean you replace people, because you still need the human in the loop to sort of, be the air traffic controller to monitor everything. But, your first use case, boring, tedious work, could the AI and the rental software do that for you and be really like I said, the Michael Jordan of rental coordinators?
Yeah. And the beautiful thing too is, like, you think of it like a video game, as long as the AI has good signal on when it's scoring points or when it's doing something wrong, the current like thumbs up, thumbs down. And in that kind of super intelligent rental coordinator, the point system is like, what's our gross margin looking like? What's our revenue looking like? What's our usage, utilization rates looking like? If you can give the AI these signals back, it can move the numbers. I've seen it.
Yeah. That's the human in the loop, right? You got to tell what is it optimizing for, and like, hey, we ultimately want to build a profitable business here, right? So let's think about that together. It's got access to your financial data, right? That is not 2024, but the way rate this is going, this 2030, is that sort of where like your rental software is not just a side software, but is it actually the brains behind your rental business? I don't know. That's still scary, but that could that may be where things go. We'll see. I guess last question, Brian, as we wrap up. What's the future for Scout? You've been here doing this for less than a year, like tremendous growth. We've had a great experience working with you, and obviously sent you some other customers. What's on the horizon for your company?
Yeah, so a lot of these pieces that we're bringing up that look in the future, unlocking vision, unlocking, having templates for invoice processing, kind of OCR, PDF. What Scout is just this platform where there's a bunch of tiny workflows that you can kind of connect and hook up to your AI and personalize your AI and make it your own. The place, like our bread and butter, is like working with teams like Quipli that already have their data organized and like these kind of software platforms that we can just plug into. But we do also have some, personal use kind of ChatGPT-esque functionality that we'll make more robust. And we're early still, a year in, and we're raising, but so far we've been growing at about 150% month over month, and it's been a crazy ride.
Pretty good growth numbers. Yeah, and that's how fast this is changing. Well, it's been great getting to know you, Brian. Thanks for coming on today. I think it's exciting. I think the clear thing is there will be a role for artificial intelligence in the rental industry, particularly rental software. I think how that looks when it comes, still up for debate, but I'm learning a lot from you, and it's been cool to see how quickly this is happening. It is here to stay, whether we like it or not. So I think it's important for us to all acknowledge that and start thinking about how do we make our rental companies better? How do we make our rental customers happier? So we'll see, but it's exciting to be on this journey with you, Brian.
Awesome. Same here. Thank y'all so much.
All right. Thanks, everyone. See you guys.